Well, now this is good. For
Thank
sure.
you.
Right.
I'd like to call together the Monday, June 19th meeting of the City of Monona City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Bernstein.
Here.
Alder DePula.
Here.
Alder Holmquist.
Here.
Alder Moore is excused. Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Rodemacher.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see. First item, we do not have minutes, correct? Correct. We will have our minutes at the next meeting, the minutes of the June 5th meeting. Moving on to appearances. First up is Brian Henry, who would like to talk about the short-term rental ordinance.
Yep. Good evening. Thanks for having me and allowing me to speak tonight, and thanks for your service to our community. Appreciate all you do. Our family resides at 5004 Maywood Road. There's a short-term rental adjacent to our property at 5007 McKenna. And on numerous occasions, the renters of 5007 have been loud and disruptive, causing loss of sleep for our family members. We previously lived in Fitchburg on Summit View Road, where an STR was operating for 2 years right next door to us, also causing disruptions to our family on daily living, and that happened on numerous occasions as well. So I've got some background with this. My main reason for speaking directly to you tonight is that previously there was a section on the proposed City of Monona ordinance for STRs under the operation of short-term rentals, stating the short-term rentals shall be rented for a minimum of 6 consecutive days by each guest. My understanding is that this aspect of the proposal for STR ordinance is being removed. I'm speaking tonight to strongly encourage you to keep the 6 consecutive day rental section of our STR ordinance. The 6 consecutive day rental is the single most important facet of an STR ordinance that will have an immediate and long-term impact on STR in our community. The City of Waunakee has this exact provision included in their STR ordinance and has found it to be decisively effective. After talking with the City of Waunakee clerk today, she mentioned that they are able to monitor the compliance of this particular order through the use of quarterly marketplace revenue data that is required to be provided by all STRs to their finance department. So that's pretty important as far as I see it. Secondly, I'd also like to propose that you add in the city ordinance sections a quiet hours section. I know the city already has quiet hours, but it can't hurt to duplicate that within the ordinance. Something to consider might be the quiet hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then lastly, I'd also like, I saw that the proposed annual permit fee for an STR is set at $750, and I would like to ask you to amend that fee to a minimum of $1,000 annually. As we know, the cost of living in Monona is not getting any less expensive. STR permit fees can certainly help ease some of that burden for those of us who make Monona our home. The other aspect of this is safety. The fact that every time the renters are occupying that STR premises, they're unknown individuals. And I make a point to know my neighbors. I was brought up that way, and personally I think it helps to create a more welcoming and safe community. In the case of an STR, we don't have neighbors. We have unknowns with homeowners who I can't reach out, or people I can't reach out to. So I just don't feel comfortable addressing the unknown renters next door when there is a problem. And that's how I would like to handle this. That's how we would all like to handle it. So that's all I have. I just want to thank you again for your time and much gratitude for all you do to keep Monona safe and welcoming community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one other appearance tonight, and that is Dick Adler, who would like to speak about the street name change of Squaw Circle. If you'd like to come up here, and could you come up to the microphone for that way we can hear you on the video recording.
Thank you, all of you. This is I think my fourth appearance between the council and the Public Works Committee. And I wasn't planning to speak except to get information. At the last Public Works meeting, about a month ago, the committee voted unanimously to change the name of our street, which is Squaw Circle, and also to keep it a circle and not use Kathy Thomas Way as a new decision. Am I correct on that? You were the committee. Mm-hmm. And the committee voted unanimously to recommend that to the city council. Am I right on that?
Yep.
And so I'm here just to see what the next step is. We don't disagree with renaming the street, all for that. We're against calling it a way, and we're against Kathy Thomas Circle or Way, whatever you want. We know Kathy Thomas probably better than any of you on this council. We go back years and years when she was an employee at the old Kohl's store. So I've known Kathy very, very well, and I think it's a disservice to Kathy Thomas for all the good things she did for Monona over the years to put her name on the street that is very hard to identify in Monona. Our street is 3 families. No traffic except us, the garbage pickup, and the mailman. That's it. Why would we bury her name on the street like ours when there are more dignified streets that should be changed in Monona? I remember at the meeting, somebody on the committee made reference to the fact, well, we can't change Monona Drive, we can't change Baskerville Avenue, because we did that, we'd have 20, 30 people charging in here saying, hey, what's going on? Well, I consider that just a little bit inferior, a little bit discriminatory, a little bit white racist. That comment basically is telling me that people who live on Monona Drive or Baskerville Avenue are better, are smarter, they're not as important as the 3 of us, which is now 2 of us, by the way. One passed away recently. So that's my point. I don't know what the next step is in the process. That's what I came to find out. And I don't know who to talk to about that.
Well, I think we can, when you're making an appearance, we can't get into a back and forth about
Sure,
it.
I understand
But the
that.
council will be talking about this later on in the agenda.
Oh, okay.
So,
That's all I wanted to find out.
Okay.
Sure. Okay?
if you'd like to speak, could you fill out a form?
No, she didn't. I did it for her.
I'm the wife, but, you know, he should add a few things, like
No.
somebody calling people and saying it should be named Kathy
I want,
Thomas.
really, I want
Have
to
it on the
thank,
board, that shouldn't be.
I want to thank the Public Works Committee. They were terrific to work with, very understanding, a lot of vision, a lot of wisdom. So I want to compliment the people who were on that committee. They very smart people, and they were very cooperative and transparent. So pass that word on to all those people.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Did you want to speak, Mrs. Adler? Because
No,
there's
that's
forms back
No.
there. Okay, all right. Okay. All right, I will declare appearance.
He's on my side.
I will declare the appearances closed. There is no public hearing. We have one item on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to unfinished business, item G1A, consideration of resolution 23-6-2627, authorization to order a police vehicle for delivery in 2024, put forth by the police chief. Is there a motion to approve this?
Motion to approve. Second.
Chief?
Good evening, Council. This is the second read, as you know. For those who may not be aware or weren't in attendance, this is my request for authorization to order this vehicle. It was previously approved for the 2023 capital budget. The ordering window was so narrow that we weren't able to do that. So this request is for your authorization to order it now, with that anticipation that it will be approved with your consent in the 2024 capital budget. This will be one of two vehicles now that I'll be requesting in the 2024 capital project.
Any questions for the chief? Doug?
Probably more a question for you and Mark is, do you know, is it likely that at least one police vehicle will be included in the 24 capital budget?
Additional one?
This
Will
one?
be this one.
Yeah.
Have you moved that one up to 23? Or,
So it's carryover from 23.
so, well, yeah, so we're swapping basically.
The truck will be, is that right?
Yeah, the truck will be in 24 now, and then we'll
Okay.
move car up.
I just want to make sure that we're actually really going to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the.
Assuming somebody ever builds it.
Right.
And if I may, only one vehicle, we were due for two vehicles this year. That was sort of my sacrificial lamb to only go down to one, even though that one vehicle was costing a little bit more because of the needs of that vehicle, both the officer accommodation and the utility of that vehicle. Next year, I can't get away with going just one again, and so you'll hear me plead with all of you for two, and this is one of the two.
Which is, the two was already indicated.
Yes, it's already in the
Yeah.
So it's not
five-year
like
plan.
it's a s-
Yeah. Okay.
additional area.
Right.
Any other questions? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder DePulo.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Rademacher.
Aye.
Alder Bernstein.
Aye.
Yeah, there was originally
Yeah.
one.
There wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, DePulo and Holmquist.
Motion passes. The next item, item 1B, consideration of Resolution 23-6-2625, a resolution to approve purchase of the 2025 Pierce engine put forth by the police chief. Is there a motion to approve this? Or the fire chief, sorry.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Jerry?
Good evening, everybody. This is the second read for this particular resolution. As my cohort said, for those that weren't here or not aware, we're looking for approval to order a replacement engine for Engine 4. It will be a 2025 model year. The current build cycle is between 24 and 28 months, so we have to have a resolution this early to be able to purchase the vehicle to get it delivered by the end of 2025.
Questions?
Mayor, if I could,
Sure.
there was a question posed, I think Alder DePula had asked about the council's ability to bind future councils. And I just wanted to let everybody know, I did look into that. On contract matters, you can bind future councils. You can order stuff now and financially commit the city, future councils to do it. It's regulatory matters. You can't bind the council. You can't pass an ordinance and require that that ordinance stay in existence for 20 years. So this is totally within your authority and property.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, anyone? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder, excuse me, Alder Moore is not here. Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Rademacher.
Aye.
Alder Bernstein.
Aye.
Alder DePulo.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jerry. Next item, 1C, consideration of ordinance 6-23-766, amending section 367-1 of the Code of Ordinances relating to short-term rental properties and establishing a fee, put forth by the mayor. Is there a motion to approve this?
Make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Bill, I guess, do you want to lead this? Bill has made a few more red lines, correct?
Yes, so all but one of the red lines are from what was proposed last meeting. The only thing I added from the last meeting to this meeting is section 2E. I included a definition of the term stay. since we're using that term throughout the ordinance. That was at Alder Rademacher's request, and you can all read it, but I'm basically defining it as a rental to one particular party for a single period of between 1 and 29 consecutive days.
And this basically separates it from other types of rentals, right, where people rent for a year or...
Correct, yeah. Anything more than 30 days or more would be a tenancy. And it's just, for purposes of the ordinance, it's to, since we're using that word stay, we need to make clear what it is. So if I rent on Wednesday and somebody else rents on Thursday, that would be 2 separate stays.
Do you have anything else about the changes that you've made?
No, all the other changes are the same as what was proposed last meeting. And again, that was to simply address issues of enforceability if we go with the software that staff is proposing. And Doug is more able to discuss that than I am.
Doug?
Thank you. So yes, really the sort of reasoning behind this is to assist with the enforcement, having been through sort of a demo of the software that staff would like to use to pursue this. And so a lot of this was sort of looking at the ordinance and thinking about the enforceability, the tools that we would have, just recognizing the number of properties, and in order to sort of better serve the community to do that as well. And so just for highlights, a couple of the elements that were a part of this. Changes would be that everybody must apply for a permit prior to advertisement of the property. That removed the 15-day sort of exception for those renting sort of for a shorter period. A lot of this owes to kind of the initial setup. A lot of the inspections and things like that are fixed costs that would need to be reviewed regardless. With that, there is the opportunity for a 50% credit to the next year of fees if it's proven out after the fact that it is to be less than 15 days within that year. And then also the application fee is proposed to be $750, and that is roughly 3 times the median nightly rate. Based on April 2023 data, the median nightly rate is $257 in the city, and the recommendation, sort of the industry standard, is to do 3 times the median rate, and so that would be included. And as the city attorney mentioned, the definition of stays has also been included. Thanks.
Bill, I just had one question. I know Mr. Henry mentioned striking the provision I, was it 3I? Or 3J, STR may not be rented to more than one person or group in any 7 consecutive day period. I know there was a reason we decided to strike that. Do you remember, Doug or Bill?
Right, yeah, we're not, the statute does not allow us to do that. I would point out in response to his comments, though, that certainly the noise, the quiet time, they're going to be subject to the same ordinance like anybody else in the city is. But with respect to the less than 6 days of rental, in your packet is the highlighted 4 subsections. And you'll recall we do permit rentals of 1 to 6 days, but we make the requirements more burdensome for the STR. For instance, we say sub G, if the short-term rental is operated for stays of 1 to 6 days, it shall be the operator's primary residence, to preclude kind of investor STRs. The other ones too are just imposed tighter limits for these stays of less than 7 days. So I guess to address the resident's concern, he's right in that we're allowing stays of less than 7 days, but we are making it fairly draconian for these property owners. It is a tougher, the rules are quite stricter if they're going to engage in these short-term rentals.
It has to be someone's primary residence, correct?
Correct.
Which is
Or
not...
they have to be physically there, is what I'm seeing in 7 each.
Right.
Yeah, the way it's intended, the way I read it is G says if it's going to be less than 7 days, it has to be their primary residence. Then H says if they're staying there
Yeah.
while the rental is occurring, there's no limit on the number of days. So no matter what, it's got to be the primary residence. If they're staying there while their guests are staying there, then there's some lessening of the burdens.
And I think do we only know of one where it's someone's primary residence?
So we do have the breakdown of sort of entire homes versus partial, if you will, and it's 98% for entire homes. So whether that defines it primary residence or not, but it would suggest that the host would not be staying there during that time.
So this, in essence, would take care of that issue.
I think so.
Okay.
But we don't-
Doug?
We don't know of that 90-some percent, which ones are the homeowner's primary residence and which are just investor.
That's correct. That would not be shown in the sort of the data. That would be captured during applications and things like that. That would be a part to that form.
We do know of one, I think it's off Schluter Road, though,
I
the
think
one
so.
I've heard of.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a road in there. Anyone else have any questions? Alder Holmquist?
Bill, so if it is a primary residence and the individual, the operator of it, is not going to be there at the time of rental, and it's less than 6 days, we're limiting them to 30?
Correct. That's subsection I. It's limited to 30 days between July 1 and June 30.
Was there a reason for that?
We wanted to encourage primary residence, and we wanted to encourage, in those sort of very short stays, the owner being present during the stay. And rather than use a stick approach, we tried to use a carrot approach.
So, walk me through this. So, if the owner primary residence, and they choose to do one rental of 6 days, would they not be guaranteed the 180 days by state statute?
No, because state statute only allows them 180 days for stays of between 7 and 29 days. We as the city, in compliance with the statute, could outright preclude stays of less than 7 days.
Oh, sorry, 7 days. So I rented for a 7-day period.
Yep. If it's 7
I
days.
then can do 180 days.
Correct. And that's statutory. We couldn't override that.
And
Any other
And
questions?
it doesn't limit every future rental to be 7 or more consecutive days, correct?
I mean, could they have some 7 and some less than 7 if it's their primary residence?
Yeah, they could mix them, but anything under 7, they're going to have to also comply with these highlighted subsections.
Okay. And so if it's a non-primary residence, every single stay is required to be 7 or more?
Yes.
In that state statute?
No,
Did you
that's
say? That's
subsection G of our ordinance.
Okay.
Which is what Mr. Henry spoke to,
Mhm.
really. It's really the safety of this revolving door that is such a concern, which I think this new language refers to.
Well, I mean, I also heard in the safety comment that it's related to knowing who is the owner and being able to get a hold of them if that's the issue. So there is a part of it of, well, why limit the number of days? If it's primary residence, why 30 days? Why not 180?
Because if it's more than 7, we would be precluded from having any of the highlighted. language. The statute says you can do it, you get 180 days. City, you can't require that it be their primary residence. The only thing the statute does not preempt us on is stays of less than 7 days.
So item I, what I'm suggesting is I don't know why we're saying 30 days. If we're having rentals 1 to 6 days, it's primary residence. Why do we want to hold someone to 30 days in a year?
The intent was simply to minimize the number of 1 to 6 day stays. But you're absolutely right. If that's the council's will, we could certainly strike that, in which case these 1 to 6 day rentals, as long as they complied with the other sections, could be up to 180 days if we were to strike I.
And anyone could do that then? Or just people that is their primary residence?
No, well, anybody could do it, but if you're going to rent for less than 7 days, it has to be your primary residence.
Doug, did you have a question?
Well, I mean, I think the 30-day limitation should limit the cumulative impact on the neighbors. Because there just won't be as many stays next door.
Right, because I is intended to get at the short-term stays, less than 7 days, and the owner is not there. That's where we're trying to limit those to 30 days a year.
Doug?
I had a question, I guess, for staff. Does the proposed ordinance require the operators to provide you with enough information to be able to actually implement the regulations?
I would say so, yes. I think one of the biggest things here is the software that we're looking at has a lot of nice features, including reporting options and tracking of certain events and things like that. And so that is a large part for the reason for the application up front, so that we have any record of any short-term rental within the city. We should have contact information, cell phone, email address, things like that. So we have that point of contact, which is often from other code enforcement type elements, one of the bigger challenges is just having the ear of that person. But if we have that as part of the application, then you would hope that would help that process.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess on the other end of it, if we find someplace that's doing short-term rental but they're not complying with the ordinance, what's the penalty?
We would revoke their permit.
Well, they wouldn't have a permit. I'm saying just somebody just doing it, and the police get called there for some noise or something, and they find out they don't have a...
They'd be subject to citation for a violation of this ordinance. And I believe we adopt the general penalty structure, which is $100 to $500 per day. No, I'm sorry, $500 to $1,000 per day.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyone else have any questions? Doug?
Yeah, I have
Doug,
one.
did you just want to add something to that?
It was
Can you hear me?
Could I just,
the
is it okay if Doug just addresses? I'm not sure if he was going to address something that Doug was
This was just
talking about.
hopefully a quick clarification point, but just for the city attorney, under operational requirements 7F, it says 180 consecutive days. I just wanted to check. That didn't appear to be the same as, say, other communities.
Yeah, that's right. We are defining a 180-day season.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And that's to avoid the issue of keeping track of which days. Yeah.
Thanks.
Rick, I'm sorry, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. The gentleman asked about amending the fee structure from $750 to $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill, you've touched on this before, but maybe just for his benefit, you could repeat what we're allowed to do in terms of setting up fees.
Yep, sure, Rick. So by law, any fees that the city charges have to be commensurate with the costs that we incur for overseeing the permitting process. We can't make a profit on our licensing or our permitting. The $750 was determined after all of us got together and tried to sort of add up what are these costs involved. Obviously, we haven't implemented this thing yet. If after a year turns out we were wrong and there are more costs or more less costs, we would come back to the council to look to revise that. But the $750 right now is staff's best determination is what it will cost the city to administer this program.
Teresa?
Attorney Cole, can you point out the part of the ordinance language that speaks to the quiet hours of the?
I think that's a different ordinance.
It's in a
Completely.
different section of the code. Yep.
Fair enough. Okay.
Brian?
Under item 8, it indicates that there basically is an opportunity for the administrator to make some modifications to the requirements up above. The first one indicates that if it is economically unfeasible, and so my question is, if I purchased a home to run a STR, not a primary residence, and I said everything up in item 7 makes it economically unfeasible, I need an adjustment. Is this allow that adjustment to be made?
It does. The operative word in there is may. We very intentionally did not word it as shall. So the city administrator or their designee can modify them, but is not obligated to modify them. So if someone comes and they have a economic basis for, they can ask for a modification, and after looking at it all, the administrator can modify it, but he's not under an obligation to do so. And that was simply intended to provide some administrative flexibility in enforcing this. And I think that would be one of the subsections that, as we get this under our belt and we administer it for a year or two, we can take a better look at, is that subsection necessary? Can it be tweaked? Can it be limited or expanded? I think that's one of them that we have to sort of play it by ear on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we have a motion. I just want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered first. Anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah.
Rick?
I just wonder if we should just go ahead and schedule some kind of annual report, or is that already in the works?
Doug,
Just so we-
that is in the works, isn't it?
There is,
Okay.
yes, there is reporting from the sort of responsibilities, I believe, quarterly for each of the properties. But it would certainly be something that I think, as has been mentioned, as city staff gets more familiar with this and as it develops, I can imagine an annual type update or document included for council review, certainly.
We'll make a
Good.
note of that. Anybody else?
Just a
Brian?
minor correction, I think, in 2E, I think you got days and then consecutive days. My guess is it's just intended to be consecutive days, and the first can just be deleted.
Yes, you're right. So it would say between 1 and 29 consecutive days.
Oh, because days is your
Days,
days.
yeah.
Okay. Anybody else?
And then just for clarification, when I go back to the 100, so primary residence, and I look at, if I'm in the other category and I get 180 days for the 7 or more, just to kind of make myself think about it some, if I took every one of those as a stay, 7 days as the minimum, and took the 180, you're talking about a 25-day stay cycle, or a little bit more, right around there. And so if we do that equation to the homeowner that goes away for the weekend, that's likely going to be a 2-night stay, which is going to give you 14 weekends. Probably a decent starting point, even though I think it's a random number. But
I think your
I
point
think a
about
decent standpoint.
needing to start somewhere is really valid.
Yeah. That would be the one that, like, if I was seeing an adjustment of someone going, well, actually,
Yeah.
we have a routine renter that comes and they work at the hospital and they're staying and we're burning up those. I would want us to look at those types of things as an accommodation. Someone that's, in town for business 3 days a week and they want to stay at home.
Well, I think that would be a situation that would be appropriate for the subsection 8 accommodation you had mentioned. And if the administrator elected not to grant that, that decision would be appealable to this council. So that, this body could effectively give the exception if you wanted to.
Perfect.
Anybody else? I think obviously we've already passed this one and are already making revisions, so I think we're definitely open to reconsidering things once we see how it works.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing no other questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Now we'll move on to new business item 2A, renewal application for 2023-2024 Class B fermented malt beverage and Class B liquor licenses for Blazing Wings Incorporated, 3 Glen Lake Parkway, Atlanta, Georgia, 30328, doing business as Buffalo Wild Wings, 6544 Monona Drive, put forth by the License Review Committee. Doug, did you want to address this one?
Yeah, I can kind of run through a little bit of the history. And so during a sort of routine annual, semi-annual license check by Officer Flora, it was discovered that Buffalo Wild Wings had no operators on premise, which is a violation not only of Monona ordinance but also state statutes. They were issued a citation. There were 3 other establishments who were also cited for not having a licensed operator on premises. So the LRC met, the License Review Commission met May 9th of this year. Arlene had sent letters to each of the 4 establishments that had received citations requesting they appear before the LRC to explain the situation. 2 of those did appear on that date, satisfied the committee, recommended approval. They were approved at the last meeting. BW3 and Monona Mart did not appear, so we met again last week. Again, letters were sent to each of them. Monona Mart did appear, satisfied the committee with its explanation, and we just approved their license under the consent agenda. BW3 did not appear. In the meantime, my information is BW3 did get 5 employees with operators licenses. So I guess the question in front of us with this is whether to renew the alcohol license. I would just say, from the LRC's viewpoint, failure to have a licensed operator on premise is a really serious violation. Because the entire regime of alcohol regulations at that level is focused on being able to control the sale and the consumption on premises. And so if there's nobody there who's trained, who has the certification as a licensed operator, it's potentially going to lead to problems, potentially serious problems. So, and I do see that we do have a representative from Buffalo Wild Wings here tonight, so maybe you can, if it's okay, kind of go ahead and, introduce yourself, but explain what happened with why you didn't have any operators, what's the situation now, and I guess in respect to the License Review Committee, why nobody came to 2 meetings in a row.
So I'm Troy. I'm the Assistant General Manager at Buffalo Wild Wings here in Monona. So for what happened is I was hired roughly just about a year ago, last June on the 21st. I was hired on as the kitchen manager, and when we were brought in, all I was told that I was needed to take was my responsible alcohol serve safe, and then the rest of the operator licenses and everything would be handled by my general manager. From there, my district manager at the time had never given me any direction as being in the kitchen that I needed to get my operator's license to be hang up in the building. So then, I was hired as kitchen manager, and then I was promoted this past February to the assistant general manager position, and that moved me to the front of house position. But even from there, I was still never notified that I needed to get my operator's license. As far as I was told, is that I was okay with my alcohol serve safe that I had taken in June. That is good for 3 years. So now, after Officer Floor had come in and met with us and had explained the citation, what was going on, within that hour of going on, I was able to get my team together to get down to City Hall and get our provisional operator's licenses to continue serving alcohol that day. So from here on out, now we all have our operator's licenses. Our licenses are all hanging up inside the building. And this won't happen again because myself personally will be keeping track of make sure they're staying up to date, and then along with make sure that they're always hanging up. And every new manager that comes in the building has their operator's license.
So how many operators do you have now?
So I have myself, my general manager, our service managers. We have five in total still. And then I also just kind of wanted to note that I apologize personally and on the behalf of Buffalo Wild Wings that we were not trying to ignore the request or letters to attend a City Hall meeting. The first one, it was kind of lost in translation between the meeting and then with the citation that was written that needed to be paid. I thought when Buffalo Wild Wings got the initial letter, that it was stating that's when the fine, the citation needed to be paid for. So that's why we weren't here. And then I was never given one personally for the one that was for last week. So I was told about the one I needed to be here for today.
Okay. I appreciate all that. I would say, while I understand that kind of puts you in the clear, it does kind of raise some questions about Buffalo Wild Wings' overall corporate control, although it sounds like they are now aware also of the need to be more on top of this. I think Patrick had it.
Patrick?
I just wanted to know now, the corporate entity, the folks that manage Buffalo Wild Wings corporate, are they implementing any SOP that managers must get their certification and go through this? Because most restaurants in Wisconsin know this. Most bars know this. So how it got missed, I guess, by BW3, which is how many locations do you have in Wisconsin? And they're all of the locations have to have licensed operators. So I guess I echo Doug's concerns too about, what kind of management are you getting from corporate, or are you just kind of on your own?
From the experience that I've had in the year that I've been here, it's for most part we've been on our own. But we've had when I first came in, the district manager we had is now different from now. It's like this district manager we did have was only within our building, within the medicine location, within the next 2 months.
Gotcha.
So he was already on his way out. So I don't know if that was his way of checking out. But then my current district manager Vince, he's actually the one after I notified him of the incident that did happen. He was on top of it immediately, and now he is implemented to make sure that everyone that comes in gets their operator's license and comes down here whether they get taken care of.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mayor,
Bill? Yep.
And sir, you're just the messenger, so
yeah.
I don't mean to say this directing toward you personally, but I would encourage you to emphasize with your supervisors what's going on here, because as Alder Wood mentioned, it's a serious offense. This stuff is not treated lightly, at least in Winona, and requesting your appearance at license review twice and not appearing, they could have just, you're done. The only reason you're here tonight is because the city clerk and the city administrator put you on the agenda here tonight. And frankly, I'm a non-voting member. The alders vote. If they vote not to renew tonight, your liquor license will lapse in June, and it'll be 3 weeks till you get a hearing, which, not to put too fine of a line on it, but means you will not be serving any liquor, beer, or wine for that 3-week period of time. So again, I don't know how the vote will go tonight, but I would encourage you to emphasize to your bosses how close on the nice edge you are to basically being shut down for 3 weeks.
And actually, it's not started for immediate approval at this point. So you can certainly do that if you want to, Doug. But
Yeah. Well, I was going to point that out to the council, that this is on for first read, so we don't have to suspend the rules. We're not going to meet again until July 17th. That would definitely send a message. Whether you think that's proportional or not, I guess we have to decide. But so the options are, I guess, suspend the rules and vote on it, or not, and wait until July 17th to vote on it, and vote up or down.
If I could add on that, and too, it is, as with all liquor licensing, that there are due process rights involved. So if we are not going to renew tonight, they have a right to a hearing. They're not going to get their hearing by July 1. But Aline would have to put them on notice of the non-renewal by July 1, the reasons for the non-renewal, and we would then have to set it for an evidentiary hearing in front of License Review Committee. That's the due process they would be afforded to be heard on the renewal as quickly as possible.
Patrick, did you have?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that it's very easy to send the assistant general manager to our meeting tonight and have this gentleman be the responsible party when the responsible party is actually the agents on the application, right? So I feel that we're not really sending them any sort of message other than I don't know. I just feel that there should be some consequences where we at least get their attention, and maybe they need to Zoom and be part of this discussion about the lapse of the non-renewal and non-communication, because they're not setting the policy in the store. This is a company with SOPs. This is a company with employee handbooks. This is a company with all of these things that somehow it's not being enforced.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is important.
This is a company that knows how to use a calendar.
Yes.
No, my license expires a year from today. Let's put it on the calendar.
So,
yeah.
So my preference as an alder would be that we take it up at our next meeting.
Yeah. And if I could just make sure I have a clear understanding of what's going on, I completely echo Attorney Cole's words. I feel like you're a sacrificial lamb that's been sent in to do a very difficult job,
Yes.
and I do feel for you. And I know this isn't your responsibility or fault. I guess I just want to make sure I understand. So the management of this establishment was notified not once but twice and requested to appear to discuss this, and did not appear either time.
Right. And my concern is that there's someone at corporate or a person above this gentleman saying that, yeah, don't worry about it. You took your course online. You don't need to do anything else. That's an issue.
So,
Bill?
So if we're not going to renew tonight, the statute requires that Aline send them a notice as to the non-renewal and the reasons for the non-renewal by July 1. Not to put words in the council's mouth, but I believe the basis for the non-renewal would be the violations of Chapter 125 with respect to not having licensed operators on premises. The renewal application was submitted untimely, The statute requires that it be done by April 15th. It did come in late to that. And the failure of Buffalo Wild Wings to appear before license review on the 2 times that they were summoned. That would be the basis for the intent to non-renew, and then that would subsequently be heard at a hearing in front of license review unless the council somehow renews it sooner.
Is the fact that it's just on for first read right now and we don't necessarily have to vote at all, correct? We can just
Correct. It's just
opt to wait
procedure.
until July 17th, but their license runs out on June 30th, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, it'll expire June 30th.
So we're not actually denying,
No, correct.
voting to deny it.
That's a very good point,
Your
Mike.
council isn't if they don't vote on it, correct?
No, but
But in effect, that's what's
it
happening.
is a non-renewal effective July 1.
But just so that this gentleman can communicate, it is policy that we read one meeting and vote the next. So that,
Does that
so all
mean-
we're doing is following policy.
Does that mean they'd be closed from January 1st or July 1st to that date? Or they only can just serve food?
They can serve food. They just, all the alcohol, beer, wine, liquor, would have to be secured, locked away, and not served. And the police will undoubtedly be doing spot checks to ensure that occurs. From the period of time, they can serve up and through June 30th. Effective July 1, they're not going to be able to serve until they get renewed, if they get renewed. Because honestly, that issue would go back to license review. We would have our hearing. License review could renew, or they could decide, no, based on the seriousness of the thing, we're not going to renew.
But at the same time, this would come back, this item that's on the agenda tonight would come back July 17th. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking this through now because it'll come back on July 17th for renewal of a license that at that point in time has already lapsed.
So would they have to go through the whole application process again?
Yeah, well, I think they will get their hearing in front of license review.
Assuming they ask for a hearing.
Assuming they ask for it. They will be entitled to that if license review determines that it can be renewed, then it would be renewed, sort of retroactively.
Okay.
So
Could license review do that before June 30th? Or, I mean, and then, but then it would still have to come to us for final approval, correct?
I don't know, does license review just approves them, don't they, renewals? Or do they come back here?
No, they have to come here.
Yeah, so they would have to come back.
So regardless, we're talking July 17th unless you vote to take it out of order tonight, you vote on it tonight.
That's right.
And license review is scheduled to meet the 12th, or whatever that,
11th.
second Tuesday, 11th.
Alder Holmquist?
For the notices that were sent for appearance, do they go to the agents and the location where the agents are, or do they go to the store
So I was
addressed to the
wondering
store
too.
manager?
Yeah.
Colleen, do you know?
The first one went to just the store, the second one went to the store and corporate.
So both, okay. Mailed. Okay.
Just how I get them.
Anyone else?
And the agenda, or the, if I heard it correct, then the application was done out of time?
Yeah, so
Three days late, I think.
Right, but by law, if they submit the application no later than April 15th, then we are obligated to renew or give notice of not intending to renew by June 15th. We're past that date, but we're past that date because they didn't submit by April 15th. That's what allows, frankly, us to, if the council's inclined to, just do nothing and let the thing lapse.
So there's one additional thing here. They didn't submit it on time to start with, and then they didn't respond to 2 letters.
Right.
I think they need a hearing at the ALRC.
Yeah. Right?
Items 6, A and B, were indicated as yes, and indicates information to
looking at the
be
application?
filled out on page 3.
What page are you?
This is part of the application. It indicates questions 6A and 6B.
On page 26 of the packet. Oh.
So that, there isn't a page 3 submitted. I know I sent an email earlier, and I believe I got a response. I just haven't read it yet. About that page 3 might have been at the License Review Committee. And so I'm curious, and this goes to who fills out this application, which clearly is not the gentleman sitting in front of us tonight.
No.
That is corporate office. So corporate office sent the item in late, and then they're answering yes to question 6A and B, which is a concern of mine.
Saying that somebody had been convicted of these offenses.
And so it's a little concern of mine because then we don't have the okay written on this page. We have the okay written on the previous page. And I'm not sure if page 3 was actually reviewed.
And page 3 is where they could explain the answer to
Yes,
6,
and we
right?
expect an explanation.
Doug,
This
did you
isn't
maybe
usually-
never even get to that point of license review?
No, because we never really discussed the merits of it because they didn't appear.
And the first page approval is from Officer Flora. He's the police officer designated to review these on behalf of LRC. I mean, he has no authority to approve anything. He's just doing a background check, and he's recommending approval. Ultimately, it's License Review Committee that has to approve these things.
Full time on that?
Sure.
And that's our sole purpose, is the criminal background check and providing that resource to the LRC, not any of the other formalities that you might be looking for in that form. Thank you.
And that review is of all agents?
Anyone who's on here, yes.
Okay, even out of state?
Correct.
So is it the corporate office that actually sent in this application? I guess it was someone, vice president, that signed it. But that was signed in February.
What? How was it signed in February?
Doesn't it say at the bottom of
Yeah,
page?
yeah.
Yeah. It says 2/27/23.
Page 3, I'm looking at the license review packet. Page 3 says see attached list, but it's otherwise blank. I don't know if there was an attached list.
I don't have the packet with me.
Yeah, it's not, I don't see it in the packet. But anyway, yeah, I think that sort of bolsters the need for a closer look at because I totally missed it. Frankly, what Albert Holmquist just caught about the convictions.
Normally, corporations do submit an attachment if they've received any municipal citations. And I apologize, I must not have included it.
If you got it.
I have so many, so I'm sorry, I can't recall.
Well, so
Well, and on this page, it sure does look like, I know this is a copy that gets scanned in, I get it, but this page sure makes it look like there's either handwriting maybe on the back side of it or some text. So, excuse me, what was your name again? I want to see if your name is listed on here. Troy?
Yes.
Troy, who's the James?
That is my general manager, James Semero.
Yep, current?
Current, yes.
And when did you say he moved into the position?
He started the same day I did, so we both started June 21st of last year.
Okay.
Well, what is the will of the council? Do you want to leave this as new business and they can apply for a hearing?
Yes.
I don't think, it's not something we need to vote on unless somebody decides that they want to take it out of order.
Yeah, I guess my will is not to take it out of order and just follow the normal procedure that we would have with any business in the community.
So Doug, do you have anything else to say?
No.
Okay.
The only thing, Mayor, if we could, just so it's clear to everybody, because the bottom of page 2, to be completed by the clerk, does have sort of date reported to council 5/9, date license granted 6/5, date license issued 6/15. I don't mean to speak for Lean, she can speak for herself, but my understanding is that that is completed by her in anticipation of those dates, but due to the non-appearance at license review, that never occurred.
That is correct. I do pre-fill them out just because I have so many that all have to be issued at the same time. I will not do that in the future.
Well, it's probably rare that people don't appear. I don't know.
Okay.
Does
Mark?
the hearing have to be done before July 1st then?
It would had they submitted their application timely,
Okay,
but
so-
since they haven't, they don't.
So make sure I was on the same page. Okay.
Yeah, if this body intends not to renew tonight, then what I'll do tomorrow or the next day, I'll work with Aline to get a notice of intent not to renew sent to Buffalo Wild Wings. And then they can either elect to have a hearing and that'll be scheduled, or they can elect to just wait until the next city council meeting and see what happens.
But by then it already would have lapsed, right? So could we still vote on that? Since it's
Yeah, I think
are they
you could.
eligible for renewal regardless?
Effectively, it's a retroactive renewal, yeah, because they did submit their application.
Okay. All right, anybody else?
Well, unless we have page 3, I would still say we don't have a complete application. So I'd want page 3 no matter what.
On July 17th,
Yeah, and my guess
if it
is
comes back.
license review, if there was a hearing, they're going to want to see page 3.
Right.
Yeah. And it'd probably be good to see your boss here too. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I think.
I want to emphasize too that this is not, you're not in trouble by the county. This is obviously a difficult thing to come before this body and hear this news, but it's not your fault. So.
Okay. Well, unless anybody else has anything else about this, we will move on. Okay. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So that in the letter that gets sent to the stores, will that go over the process for doing, like applying for the hearing and? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they all.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Next item, B, consideration of resolution 23-6-2630, approving a 5-year contract with LifeQuest Services for ambulance billing and collection services put forth by the Public Safety Committee, and this is started for immediate approval.
Move to suspend the rules and take this out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Second.
Chief?
Good evening, everybody. This particular resolution, we currently have LifeQuest as our billing company. They are on a 3-year contract with 2 1-year auto renewals. They've done a good job for us. There's very few billing companies actually in business. There's been a lot of consolidation. And in reaching out to them, instead of going through a 1-year auto renewal, I approached the idea of a 5-year contract, and in return they came back and lowered the rate on the collections for our EMS revenue from 5 3/4 to 5.5. I did some due diligence on my part and called some of my surrounding agencies just to find out what they're currently paying. Those that have just signed contracts, those that have been in contracts, and the rate right now is right around 6%. So our rate's going to be 5.5. That's on our first and second pass EMS revenue. Collection rate is 16%, which is almost an industry standard at this point. And The contract was brought in, I submitted it to Attorney Cole for his review. He had several comments, which they were amenable to. We discussed their return stuff, and we were comfortable in presenting it to Public Safety. Public Safety, we approved it unanimously to forward it to you folks for consideration. And they're willing to terminate our existing contract and make this one live July 1st. So we'll start getting the savings this year as well.
Does anybody have any questions for the chief?
Yeah, I have one.
Rick?
Yeah, Chief, I noticed on some Google reviews there was some mention of how difficult it was to reach somebody if they had questions, and I have to say that I had a similar experience with ambulance payment. Have you heard anything to that regard, that they're not very quick in responding to customer service?
Well, I can actually speak. The only delays that I've experienced since I've been here and in previous dealings with LifeQuest is when people try and call us for questions about the ambulance bill, and we refer them up. The phone number that is on the bills that go out, the 888 number, is manned by a person. There is no answering service. There is no message leaving. It's manned by a person during their normal business hours. I would be happy to follow up and see if there have been complaints, but generally speaking, the complaints that I receive are because people don't get the terms that they want. So they call and they don't want to pay what the bill is because they feel they shouldn't have to. And those are the complaints that I receive is they feel the bill is too high. I have had no complaints of people not being able to get a hold of the billing company.
No. I got a recording, and it took a while to get any response. And the issue was the bill hadn't been submitted to my insurance before it was sent to me. So I cleared that up with my insurance, but I didn't really get any direct response from, I believe there's an office in Wapoma. And I called a couple.
If you don't mind, how long ago was that?
It was last year.
Because there was a stretch of time, and I can't remember the exact dates, there was a stretch of time of roughly 2.5 weeks that they had major phone issues where you would have gotten a recording. There was an issue where I got a recording when I called, and I've got a different number to call. But generally speaking, I get a human when I call.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Chief, is that rare that you would get a human? I mean, other organizations that offer the same service?
As in?
When you mentioned a couple times that when you call, you get a human being on the other end of the phone. It just sort of made me wonder if that was an uncommon.
I can tell you our previous billing company was a
all automated.
hand-answering
Yeah.
service.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, if there aren't any other questions, will the clerk please call the roll?
So we took it out of order?
We did.
Oh.
Yeah.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Rademacher.
Aye.
Alder Bernstein.
Aye.
Alder DePula.
Aye.
Alder Hunquist.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, C, consideration of ordinance 6-23-767, an ordinance renaming Squaw Circle to Weechawak Circle, put forth by the Public Works Committee, and this is just on as a first read tonight, so we won't be voting on it. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. Back in February and March of this year, we did receive directions from City Council for the Public Works Committee to discuss renaming Squaw Circle. The Public Works Committee did do that on March 2nd, April 5th, May 3rd, and June 7th. And we also sent letters to the residents that live on Squaw Circle. We heard back from the Edlers and their son, and we heard back from the other resident on Squaw Circle where the home is occupied, as well as 2 other Monona residents. All the feedback that we received indicated that they would prefer Squaw Circle to be renamed something other than in honor of Kathy Thomas. At the June 7th meeting, the Public Works Committee placed a vote unanimously to send to City Council a recommendation to rename Squaw Circle as Weechawak Circle. So that's what we have before you tonight. There's no action tonight, basically introducing the ordinance for the street name change and seeking any direction from city council for staff.
Does anyone have any comments they'd like to make, or?
I have a question.
Rick?
For Dan. There's also, is there a pumping station or lift station that's also got the name Squaw Circle?
The lift station is just there. I'm not sure if it has an address.
I think I saw it referred by that name.
We do refer to it as the Squaw Circle lift station. Just so if we have to direct vendors or contractors, things like that.
Okay. So the reference might change after we pass this ordinance?
Everything would change once an ordinance is passed.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? Doug?
Trying to find the resolution that we passed, the second one.
That would be the 23-3-2619.
There it is. So I think Witchy-Walk would be a fine name for the street. However, so let me just kind of go back through again how we got here. Before Alder Thomas passed away, we had already passed a resolution saying we wanted to change the name of the street and referred that to Public Works for them to go through the process of coming up with a new name. And then subsequent to that, after she passed, on that March 20th, was introduced to sort of override that one and name it in honor of Kathy, which we passed with her family here, if I remember correctly. I think you could question maybe the process of how that happened, but that is in fact what we did. And I, for one, am not willing to go back to her family now and say, well, we changed our mind, we're not going to name it for her after all. I agree it's not a major street, but it's sort of what the reason, we were in the process, we were going to rename it something. We didn't know what the something was. It was suggested that we name it for Kathy, and we approved that. Like I said, I am not comfortable going back on what we told her family and what we voted on and what we told everyone. It's sure, I think we probably will want to consider naming not just this small street in her honor.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I can't make it stop.
But I think it's worth noting that we have a number of streets named after male leaders of the community. Waterman Way, for one of the first village president. We have a lot of streets. They're all named after men who served in leadership roles in the city. We do not have any recognizing any women who have served. So I think it's for that reason, and I think that's part of the reason we approved it in the first place. Mm-hmm. To me, that's still an absolutely valid reason. I don't think it should be Kathy Thomas Circle. It should probably just be Thomas Circle to be consistent with sort of the naming conventions of all the streets. Waterman Way does not have his first name in it, for example. But that's where I am. So.
May I add something?
Patrick?
I think the rationale behind Kathy Thomas, as opposed to just Thomas, is that I think that there's a number of situations throughout history where women are recognized by using their married name, right? So then there's some confusion as to whether or not, well, who's it named for? Thomas? Is it Thomas somebody? You know, to somebody who's not familiar. I don't know. So I guess that I would just add that if we're considering that it should be clear that it is named after this woman that has given so much to the community as opposed to just being Thomas.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything to add? Teresa?
I trust my colleague's memory is better than my own. I was under the impression that we sent it back to Public Works for their recommendation as opposed to us making a final determination, but I know it's on record and we can prove me wrong. But regardless, as the gentleman here spoke earlier, part of me kind of feels like, really? Like a little stretch of street with two families, you know, this is how we're going to honor such a giant of this community. You know, I kind of feel like it's almost insulting. I think there will be big opportunities down the road to put a name on something. We can keep our eyes open for others, and if the residents of this street have spoken about their preference, then it might be just a nice example of how the city works together with those that we serve, and we hear them and listen to them by honoring their request.
Anyone else?
Just to clarify what we did refer it back to Public Works,
Okay.
but we expressed our desire that
Correct.
we name Kathy Thomas.
Yeah. Correct.
Dan?
Mayor. That was cleared to the Public Works Committee as well.
Okay.
They discussed that and debated that quite a bit. And I think it was pretty much clear among all of the committee that they heard the feedback as well. And Patrick, please back me up here if I'm wrong, but I believe they didn't feel comfortable going with something that wasn't, that the residents didn't want.
Sure.
So then a member of the committee brought up a motion to name it the same as the Bay.
Mhm.
And I think that gathered support from the committee members. So the Public Works Committee did address the resolutions as requested by City Council. And then they talked about that. It wasn't a popular option, and then they took it further and came to you with this recommendation.
Mhm.
So
That is correct.
I would like to see, you know, this very special person, I would like to see her name on something more prominent. If we're, you know. Yeah.
Dan, I'm just curious, in the past, and maybe you weren't here when this happened, I know we renamed Metropolitan Lane when we did the Riverfront project, and that, I don't think, I mean, obviously people don't live on that street, so that wasn't a contentious issue. But I know a couple of other streets have been renamed, what, Harold Avenue, that used to be Monona Pass, or something.
all of that took place a while ago. Harold Alley was named that prior to my arrival. I searched the ordinance record we have, and I wasn't able to come up with any renaming of the city street. So there was really nothing to go by in our records.
I was just curious
Yeah.
if typically we've gone with what the residents wanted, or, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have any record of that, but as far as the renaming of Metropolitan, that took place with all the paperwork and approvals for the current
Yeah.
and that development, so.
All right, well, there is no action that will be taken on this tonight, so Brian?
And maybe I missed it because I was also looking up all of our street names on the Blooming Grove website. For those of you that haven't done it yet, it has a good list, not all of them, but a good list. And I'm still curious where some of these are. How was this name decided on?
I think it was in 2020 or 2021, right? The Squaw Bay, it was the old name for the bay where Cove Circle is in Squaw Bay. And at the Public Works Committee meeting, a member of the committee brought it up that if the committee didn't feel comfortable renaming the street in honor of Kathy Thomas, how about we follow suit with the renaming of the bay? So that's how Wichawak Circle came about, to follow suit with the renaming of the bay.
Okay. I figured as much, but wanted to be sure, because at one point I know ordinance number 1 suggested a process involving kind of submitting information, and was curious if something.
Anybody else?
So Mayor, there is no action?
No, this is on for first read,
Okay.
so
All right.
this will come back.
July 17th.
July
we'll be
17th. Okay.
discussing it again.
Moving on, since no one has anything else, thanks for coming in, Dan. Item D, which is starred for immediate approval, consideration of Resolution 23-6-2629, appointing a city administrator and approving the employment agreement thereof, put forth by the mayor. Is there a motion to take this out of order?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Is there a motion to approve the contract?
I move to approve the contract of our new city administrator.
Second.
Okay, so as I notified all of you, I had offered the job to Neil Stick-Schulte, who has accepted it. Neil and I have been going back and forth for the past several days about the contract. Bill has reviewed it. Neil has agreed to it, and so we do need council agreement. So does anybody have any questions? Leah's here to answer them, or Bill or I can answer them if anyone has any questions. Do we need to have a roll call for this? Okay, if there aren't any questions, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you. Next item, E, consideration of Resolution 23-6-2628, allocating American Rescue Plan Act funds for classification and compensation study put forth by the Finance and Personnel Committee. This was approved in Finance and Personnel. Is there a motion to take this out of order?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a motion to approve? I'm sorry. All in favor? All in favor say aye.
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 Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Leah,
Thank you, Mayor.
it's all yours.
Good evening. This resolution comes before you tonight for a request for approval to use some ARPA funds to fund a third-party vendor to do a classification and compensation study for all city full-time and permanent part-time positions. Since I have been in my position with the city, we have not had a compensation plan for city employees. We do regularly participate in comp surveys. We check comps for positions. We do our due diligence in terms of comps when we are advertising for vacant positions. But COVID has sort of changed the world a little bit, and we are seeing that we are sort of falling behind the rest of the public sector market. I think that there were a lot of municipalities who used ARPA funds and have done compensation studies since COVID. And so we're starting to see that, because of that, we're sort of starting to see that we are falling behind in the market. And so we're being a little bit reactionary right now in terms of deciding what we're paying new hires. And I think this, in terms of looking at doing a potential operating referendum coming up soon is probably the perfect time to look at a compensation plan like this. And because it will help inform referendum questions and sort of where we probably need to be looking at being in the marketplace. For the first time since I've been in this position, we're starting to see that we may have some vacancies in city employment, that there are positions that we're advertising that we're not getting either any applicants at all or good pools of applicants for. So I think that this is good timing to do a plan like this.
Could you explain, just for the benefit of the public, to explain a little bit about what will be involved?
Mm-hmm. So this GovHR is the vendor that we would look at to contract with. They would come in and we would provide them job descriptions for all city positions. They come in, they look at the job descriptions, and then they send out a survey to employees to complete in terms of detailing what their job responsibilities are and what their day-to-day job involves and entails. They then interview at least one employee from each position, and then they take all of the skills and all of the interview notes, and they put them in a graph that sort of classifies them by skills, education, needed to perform their position. And then they classify each position into a plan so that they are looking at sort of the equity between different skills that are needed across the city in different departments and positions. So we would sort of have, tier 1 positions require these skills, and this is the compensation range for those positions. Tier 2 positions require this range of skills, and this is the compensation rates for those positions.
And would this provide things like step increases?
Yeah, that's something that,
Or we could decide on that?
Yeah, generally the compensation plan would sort of give you a range of compensation. And so then employees would sort of know when they're hired that this is sort of the range for the pay for this position.
We're seeing that range thing a lot.
Yeah.
So people are putting the ranges, like say 25 to 30. So a lot of people are applying, they think they're going to get to 30. And a lot of times that's the higher end, and not the 25. But, since they did their plans, that's the range they're putting out there. So it makes it tougher because somebody sees it. Oh, that's a lot more than what I'm making here.
Yeah. So any questions, Ryan?
Lots of questions, actually, unfortunately. Sorry. So when it comes to comp plans and trying to do reclassification for jobs, fairly familiar working in a school district. That's a common language that happens for administration and other non-union professionals. They'll look at different items, and one of the pieces that comes up often is unique areas or unique roles or professional areas that are difficult to hire for. And oftentimes in the comp plan that they're trying to equal everybody out by license area, level of education, all of those components. That's the other part that then might put someone in a category that doesn't meet what it is that you need to seek out. And then you're often having to then come up with how to go against your own salary schedule. Mm-hmm. So for example, I'll just use school lingo. If you can't hire a school psychologist because there are none, and they've already been classified in this category, you can't get a single person to take it at that category. You end up having to go against what you already just set up to be able to seek out an employee for that category. Mm-hmm. Which kind of defeats the purpose of, we want to equalize and provide some pay equity or compensation equity across the city. And so I think there's a bit more of a challenge to it than coming up with a simple salary schedule or grade schedule. And it can get extremely complex on if you just do salary schedules of are you on this schedule or that schedule. And we would need to be prepared then if someone is supposed to be on this schedule and we need to change it and why we're going to change it. And then additionally, if we're coming up with something that has steps and lanes, we would also need to be very prepared of, we're getting very close to, if we create a step and lane process, what are all the other mechanisms of when we don't follow that step and lane process? And if we're putting something in that has some automatic increases, it is kind of forecasting the future of are you going to abide by what you just put in writing or not?
And I don't know if we necessarily would be putting in steps or whatever. I don't know. That's a good point, right?
Because it's kind of saying, yeah, we're going to do an annual increase of 2%. I'm just making up a number. Well, you're also then sending a signal to unionized workers within the city of like, well, hang on, if they've already committed to this, that's the base. That's our negotiation is not at the zero. The 2% is kind of already guaranteed across the board. So where do you go from there? I think it's a great thing for us to do. I just want us to be prepared for what we end up with. It's not going to just be, all right, great, let's pull out the book and we use the book. There's still going to be a ton of decisions that might go against what we find, which is some of the concern, especially with our uniqueness. I think we have some categories where this actually would have been helpful, and we kind of did it previously. When I think back to our aquatic supervisor discussion a few years back, where that one was a key example of what I think this is trying to solve, where we had a role by title. If you did the search, the comparisons were not good. There was no way we would have been able to retain the person in the role. And when you understood what the role was, you realized it was much more than the aquatic supervisor. And they weren't adequately being kind of, they weren't being seen as apples to apples in comparison. And when that was done uniquely for that position, we realized that a significant salary change needed to happen. So hopefully a process like this can help with some of those unique roles that we have.
We have quite a few of them.
Yeah. In a city our size, like we end up with making up a unique role for a unique purpose, and it's not going to be easy to find the exact match.
And we do really run into that when we are looking to evaluate the compensation of a current employee with a unique role, because we don't have apples-to-apples comps to look at. And so it's difficult to justify where someone should be or shouldn't be, or guess where they should be or shouldn't be in their compensation sometimes. Oftentimes, actually.
Doug?
Well, good points. Although I do think this will give us a more rationalized way to approach employee compensation, whereas, it tends to get very ad hoc otherwise. Like a new position becomes vacant, we get a new person, we find out, whoops, out in the real world, they're actually paying a lot more than we were just paying somebody. So I think it'll help with that. I think more globally, the important thing is I expect it's going to come back and say, as Leah said, that we have fallen behind, that we have needs, and I think it will be an important piece to help justify an operating levy limit referendum in the near future. To have that, that data that can back up when we say, well, we need more money to be able to compensate our existing staff and future staff, aside from other issues like we need more people, but this would help with the compensation piece anyway.
If I can add, prior to Act 10, we had 5 unions in the city, and all but the 2 public safety unions decertified after Act 10. And we had a discussion at that point about what we were going to do moving forward. Were we going to sort of retain the wage steps that had been in those union contracts, or were we going to move towards a sort of more pay for performance or pay by performance system? And I think by default we sort of went with the latter. And I think in reality, when we have tough budgets year after year, I think no matter how good some employees' performance is, we're tied in what we can do in terms of rewarding for performance. So, I think that it would be great to have sort of a combination of both, and I think we might be able to accomplish this by working with GovHR. But certainly recognize everything that you're saying, Alder Holmquist, in terms of challenges with compensation plans as well.
Because just the thing about knowing in advance what percentage is built in, well, we run into that with the unions because we know what the operating budget, we tell them what we can afford for pay raises, and that's their floor. Then and it shouldn't, so. Yeah.
And both of our public safety union agreements have step increases for those positions. So they do have, they start at a certain wage, but they know that in 4 years, their wage is going to be up to this because it's defined in their agreement. So obviously, however it comes out, we may or may not have money to fund. Certainly all of it would be pretty doubtful, but I think it will inform what we would include in an operating referendum, certainly. Brian?
And this is more of a curiosity. Maybe this was discussed elsewhere. Was there an RFP that was put out?
So we didn't put out an RFP for this. We contacted GovHR just to sort of get an estimate of what we were looking at in terms of a cost. They have done some very recent comp plans, and one of them being the Village of McFarland, who really for us is sort of as pretty close as it's going to get to a direct comp that we have, and they just did a comp plan for them last year. So and I believe they've also just finished a comp plan for Sun Prairie recently, but in talking with them about McFarland, because we're such a direct comp for McFarland, they already sort of have a lot of that data, and so I think we'd actually save money by going with GovHR because they wouldn't have to figure out who our comps are. They already really have all the information they need to determine that based on what they did a year ago. So,
just one added thing, Dane County Cities and Villages Association 2 years ago, probably 2.5 years ago now, hired them. We all chipped in on that, all the municipalities, to do a study of, I can't remember how many communities, but it was for everybody in Dane County who's interested. And Brian, in fact, served on Brian Gatto on the committee for that. And that's what we actually used to inform pay increases 2 years ago when we actually had a little bit of extra money and were able to, do some market rate increases for some people and that kind of thing. So they're very familiar with all the area municipalities. And any other questions? Oh, Rick, did you have something?
Yes, I have a few questions for Leah. Leah, you mentioned that they did a study of Sun Prairie and McFarland. Were you able to talk to anyone there about what the impacts have been, what the history have been with McFarland and how that's changed things, or how they liked working with this particular consultant?
I do believe that they had a good experience working with GovHR. I did speak with the human resources generalist there about using them. In terms of what the results of that survey are, is that they're they're beating us in terms of comps in every job that we're advertising right now, so.
That's one of the impacts, I guess.
Yep.
I noticed with McFarland that their study also included a staffing analysis. And I don't know exactly if that would address some of Brian's concerns, but do you have any idea of what the additional cost might be for something like that, or whether or not that would fill some kind of need that we might have at this point?
I mean, I think that's something we have to discuss internally on, you know, whether we want to spend the time and effort to do that, or I mean, I feel like department heads probably have a better idea than a staffing analysis would prove on what their staffing levels need to be. But, you know, we could certainly talk to them about what that would cost to do that.
Yeah, I think it might be advisable to at least get a quote from them, what additional costs there may be, and maybe this could be an opportune moment to do that. And if there is additional ARPA money, that might be something we amend the contract to include. But when I look through the compensation study is online in McFarland, and they were able to really analyze some jobs and reclassify them because A or B is doing a lot more than their job description actually says. So it might be useful for us too, I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had another question. I saw in the quote that there, for another $2,800, that they would also do a compensation review for the part-time staff of 11 people. And I don't believe our contract includes that. Was there a reason why that wasn't included in the contract?
We haven't determined exactly how many positions we're going to review yet. So the quote that I asked for was for all of our full-time and permanent part-time authorized positions. And then with the option to add some part-time positions to that mix, you know, as we felt necessary. And I believe their quote gave us a price of $250 per added position. So that is something that we would look at.
The quote included $2,800 for the part-time staff of 11 people, and I'm not sure if there's a difference between permanent part-time staff.
So it's 11 positions, so it's like the lifeguards and that's what a part-time would be.
Right.
A lot of seasonals, so it'd be your like LTEs for the part LTE, short-time, or seasonal people. That's what those are really related to. I mean, there's the library people we would include, but more of the seasonals we wouldn't include because that's more of an adjustment every year based on the market.
So permanent part-time, or regular part-time positions are positions that are authorized by the city council for a certain salary in the budget. And hourly part-time positions, we just have a budget number for those positions, and you know, we pay as many hourly part-time people we can within those budget parameters.
Okay, so the 11 people that's referenced in their bid are not permanent part-time positions.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Brian?
In the fiscal note, this might just be like how I'm reading it. Is this, in one spot it says it wasn't in part of the 2023 budget, and in another spot it says it was authorized in the budget?
Oh, that's a mistake.
My guess is it wasn't.
It wasn't, yeah.
Okay. And then,
Yeah, I have a question if I can.
and then Mark, maybe you know this. Like, do we have a policy of when the expectation is to go to a proposal, and what are the parameters in which we would want to skip that process? And we know that there are times that we do, but
It's usually if it exceeds 25,000, we would get another quote. So even if it's, for public works ones, you have to get an actual bid. Usually what we've been doing, if it exceeds or even below that, we request you try to get one or two different quotes from some people.
Okay. And maybe that's something for us to consider
Yeah.
as
We didn't do it
a
for
body going forward of like, to get better parameters to the city administrator and staff of like, okay, if you're looking for a service and it exceeds X number of dollars, what is it that we're expecting? And knowing that there are going to be times that, of course, there's a reason why you wouldn't do it in certain situations, and we can maybe spell out some.
And this is the reason why we did this one was not to exceed 25, is because of the connection with McFarland. They already did the work. There was already a cost savings for that, and so we didn't kind of go out and get another quote because this, just because of their familiarity with that, and they're basically taking a lot of the same templates to use it, so they would be starting from scratch. So that was our rationale.
We can put in a sticky note for Neil.
He has a lot of stuff left.
Yeah, like, I mean, at some point, we should probably have some guidance that is in place for staff of when and what are the exceptions. So,
I thought we had some guidance somewhere.
We do. I just can't remember where it's at.
Yeah.
Sounds like it might not be.
We can find it.
It might not be too specific.
Anybody else? Okay, well then, I guess this is a contract, right? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Rodmacher.
Aye.
Alder Bernstein.
Aye.
Alder DePula.
Aye.
Alder Holtmans.
Aye.
Motion passes. Final item F, consideration of resolution 23-6-2631, authorizing a contract with Miller Communications for referendum communications consulting services. And this is put forth by the mayor. And start for immediate approval. Is there a motion to take this out of order?
Motion to take it out of order?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Last year, after we decided to go to referendum, I think last September, over the public safety building, Mark and I met with Miller after checking into a variety of options to do communications work for the referendum. We determined that Miller was the best one. They're recommended by the league. Brian Gatto used them in Middleton. They've done a lot. Municipalities have not done that many referendums until recent years.
They do the majority of the
municipality
ones.
Yeah, they've done the majority of the municipality ones. A lot of the other firms that we looked into are focused on school referendums, which are a different animal. As you know, we don't have to go to referendum for the public safety building, but we do for an operating referendum. So to help deal with the costs of the referendum, we are planning on doing both questions at the same election. We just don't know when that's going to be because we don't know how long the schematic design is going to take for the public safety building. So it will either be in the April election or it will be a year from November. Anyway, so we talked to Miller when we originally were thinking about going to referendum this past April. And then they didn't have any time to get started on anything because it was already September and they were involved in working on materials for other municipalities who had referendums last November. So then after that, we decided talking to the council, decided to push it back a year. Just because we just simply didn't have time to prepare for it. So we told Miller that we would be back in contact with them. After the election this year, they would like 9 months to a year to work on preparation. So that's what this is asking, to hire them. This isn't really a contract, right, Bill? This would be asking you to draft a contract with them.
Correct. The council would be authorizing myself and staff to put together a contract. If this resolution passes, I would do that. I'd work with the mayor and the administrator to get that together, but the contract would not be coming back to the council unless you decided to make that so.
So, for instance, they have already sent us this long list of questions requiring a lot of different information that they will use to help put together a communications package. So we'd like to get started on that because time is starting to move here and get done what we can anyway. Mark, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the biggest one is the question is why the operations is included in there. And most people understand the public safety. One is just to gather all the information to start an operation referendum if approved. So basically what the biggest challenge in right now is net new construction. We are getting about 200, I believe it's 233,000 roughly, give or take, a little bit with the new state revenues for 2024. And then our net new construction for 2024 was based on last year's construction. And there was, other than maybe a building or two, large house on the lake or something to that effect. We have basically zero net new construction. We'll be at like a 0.03 or something to that effect. So the additional will be like 15, maybe 30 at the max. I don't know if it's going to get that of new. Well, we can increase the property tax limit by. So you had that. It's about 260, 250. And that's just a one-time fee increase for the state share revenue. So it'll be okay for 2024. But if we didn't have that state share revenue, we'd be laying people off. I mean, there's no way around it unless we had to do a referendum or a wheel tax to that effect. But the current year right now, as you're aware of, other than Chipotle just went in, maybe a dental place that could be done by the end of the year. All our large planning commission projects that are in there in CDA, they won't probably hit starting even in the ground this year, maybe one or two. So the net new construction for 2025 is basically going to be zero. So you're looking at about 15,000 there. So that's one of the things we're looking at to for 2025 to look at that. And on top of it is, because we've always had no net new construction, we've really cut this the city to bare bones. We really only increase wages, health insurance, et cetera. The non-operating stuff is basically hasn't been increased probably a couple of years. We do a little bit here and there, so we're starting to fall behind on contracts. Each year their inflation is going up, so that's being passed on to us. We're looking at maybe recycling. That's it's going from 2 weeks to maybe 1 week. There would be additional costs. So there's like a lot of non-wage costs that are just going up that we just can't at this very time keep up with, just with the inflation being passed on to us. And also there's a lot of departments where we want to really take a hard look at additional staff. There's some various departments that are basically, if one person's out, they're falling behind. Their services are falling behind. We just can't keep up with the services if somebody goes out. We need additional staff, and different departments need additional staff, and I think we want to take a hard look at that.
Yeah.
That is part of the referendum, and then kind of the wage kind of filters into this wage study we're kind of looking at. So there's a lot of things, and part of this thing we kind of not only negotiate the public and kind of inform the public, but also kind of inform the council kind of what's going on, and because it is to the point where we're at the very end. We're at the very end. We're not going to be able, if we don't increase our levies here in the near future. I know we got the money coming in this year, but it's going to go back to normal after that, which is very small increases. We need to take advantage of that. And otherwise, we're going to have to cut services, cut people in the future.
So yeah, they would help us educate people about all of these things. Doug?
Yeah, I think this would be really valuable in gathering the information, particularly for the operating referendum, and as Mark said, to educate ourselves as well as the public about, like, we know there's a problem, but give a size and shape to that shortfall, what the challenges are if we don't get more revenue. I had floated the idea, although since we have officially, as part of a resolution, directed staff to prepare for a public safety building referendum, but we have not done that for operating, that I think it would be a good idea to have that maybe, I think
We'll have that at the next meeting.
At the next meeting in July, so that we, I mean, implicit in this is that we're going to, because we're hiring these people to do work on that, but just so that there's no ambiguity later.
Yeah, no, you're right. We should do that.
And, we obviously won't know how much we need, and that'll be later when we figure out what the amount would be.
Right, and I think a part of the education is going to be explaining to people how the additional money we're getting this year from the state is not going to cover our needs. I mean, I think it'll go a long way to some salary increases, and we've got a few other things that we don't have money for right now either that we're going to need to use some of it for. But in terms of extra positions, I mean, a police officer's, what, $80,000 to $90,000. It just, there's just no way that the additional $230,000 or whatever is going to do that, although I'm very grateful that we're getting that. So.
No, and I think we have some staff that, that they would welcome the money, but what they really need is more help so to get, to do their job.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well, if there aren't any.
I do have a question.
Okay.
When I read phase one in terms of what Miller is proposing, it feels very non-specific and general. It didn't mention anything about operating budget versus the public safety building. So I understand they come highly recommended, but their proposal doesn't really sell it to me. And so
we've asked them about that, and I felt that a lot of it, well, obviously on the cover it says public safety building and operating referenda. I guess page 1 is their cover. So I guess I wouldn't expect it to say a lot more than that, but they don't go into a lot of detail about each referenda. I think they're more focused on telling us what services they can provide and not getting into the specifics of each question.
Yeah,
I don't know
it
if
seems
that
like
answers your question.
It seems like they're going to ask us every question they can think of, and the information is going to come from us.
We will, because they'll have to learn our systems and things
Yeah.
like that, so.
Okay.
We'll work.
But they'll be able, who is actually going to decide what we need in terms of an operating budget going into the future?
The council ultimately decides that, so we'll.
But Mark and the administrator and
Neil,
the staff
yeah.
and I will all be talking about that.
So we'll sit down with all of us and we'll figure that out, and maybe, we'll come to the council and present it all.
This council has to approve the question
Yeah.
that goes on the referendum.
Yeah,
so-
they're gonna want to see the data, and we'll get the data and stuff like that, so.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my computer fritzed a little bit. Could you just tell me again?
Council
who's gonna-
has to approve the referendum question. So I'm not sure
Right.
what you missed. Mark and Neil and I and Leah and other department heads will be discussing what we need for the operating referendum, and then we'll
Okay.
provide all that information to the council at some point, because the council has to approve the question about operating that goes on the referendum, or goes on the ballot.
So what will Miller do?
Miller is doing all the communications in terms of mailings, social media, putting together slide decks, because, well, the thing is that we can't go out and campaign for this. All we can do is provide information about it. So we're going to have to do a really good job of informing the public about what it's going to entail, and I'm hoping, I know the police and fire unions have at different times told me that they will help with the campaigning, but for instance, we can't use our money to put out yard signs in people's yards. That's something that a separate group is going to have to do, that type of thing. So what Miller's going to be doing is putting together everything we need to put together an educational campaign for the public, kind of like the kind of thing you see from the school district. They do the same kind of thing when they do a referendum question. You get all those mailings. We've gotten various emails about what the referendum involves. They make appearances at public meetings and things like Monona Grove businessmen and groups like that. And
So they'll be our representative. I mean,
well, we'll
they're-
be making the appearances, but we'll be using their materials
Right.
when we make these, when we do the appearances. But we'll strictly be there to answer questions. We're not there saying vote yes or vote no.
Well, I would have liked more time to look at this, so I'm feeling that I'm going to vote no, but only because I just want to know a little further in advance when we're going to be asked to put up some additional funding. And I'm looking for more of a comprehensive plan about how we approach this rather than...
Well, I think it partly
Timeframe.
depends on, we don't really know that until we know when we're going to referendum, which we won't know
Right.
until we get this schematic plan that we're going out for bid right now. So it's kind of hard
Yeah.
to come up with a step-by-step plan when they're not, this is the services they provide, but I'm sure at some point, there is somewhat of a plan there about what they do a certain number of weeks out and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll do all that stuff.
But obviously, till they know details about our needs, they're not going to be able to do a real detailed plans because we haven't given them any information yet.
Right.
Right. But, I mean, even in this proposal, there's a phase 3 that we're not paying them as part of this.
Right, and that's for the actual mailings and that type of thing. And we may not end up doing a survey. We don't know that. It is going to depend, I guess, on what develops here to come, so.
Well, the survey is part of the contract.
It is part of
so-
it, but we don't necessarily have to do it. And this isn't actually the contract, this is their proposal. Bill is going to be putting together an actual contract. And I'm sure it will include things like if we decide not to do the survey, then we won't pay that amount, right? So.
The survey seems to be included as part of the
It is, right, but
45,000.
this isn't the contract.
So it's, so this is a proposal, we'll sit down, we'll figure out if we actually really need to do a survey. We
Yeah.
might not, and then we wouldn't be charged
Okay.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't mentioned as part of what you sent us.
Sure.
No, if I could,
Proposal
Rick,
seems
it'll
to
be a
include
time and
phase-
materials contract. So we will only pay them for the time and the materials that they expend based on things that we request them to do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so phase 1, it may conclude at that point.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
After phase 1, it may conclude at that point. We're not committed to go to phase 2.
I would think we would at least be doing communications materials like mailings and that kind of thing. We might jump from phase 1 to phase 3. It will just depend.
Or you can
Okay.
decide not to do it. Is that what you're saying? After phase 1?
You said might decide to do nothing, but I
Right.
would think we wouldn't be hiring them
Yeah.
to just gather all the information
Unlikely,
and not do
yeah.
anything with it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, I guess I still feel like this is a little bit ad hoc, and we're dealing with it one piece at a time rather than having more of a full timeline to get from A to B. I don't know if that's endemic to this process or not, but it just feels...
We've never done a
there's
referendum,
two
so do
different
we really
referendum
don't.
here, and each has its own issues, and
Yep.
it feels like a tough thing to nail down, but I just don't feel comfortable approving it as based on what I've seen.
Okay. Anybody else? Then would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Rademacher,
Aye.
Alder Bernstein,
Nay.
Alder DePula,
Aye.
Alder Holmquist,
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to reports. Any updates in discussion on DEI efforts? I will start by saying that Alder Wood and I were at the library's, the city's Juneteenth celebration, which this year was sponsored by the library. There was a very small group of people there. I spoke. Jenna spoke as well. We walked along their story walk, which is focused on a book about a woman who's kind of considered the grandmother of Juneteenth. I think we covered what Juneteenth means in our resolution last time. And then after that, we did have a film about what Galveston and actually Appleton are doing to celebrate Juneteenth, which was interesting. Apparently Appleton's been doing a Juneteenth celebration for about 15 years, which I didn't know. Anyway, it was nice, and we'll continue every year to do something. So, does anyone else have anything to share about DEI efforts?
They also raised the flag.
Oh,
at
right,
the
that's
library.
right. Raise the Juneteenth flag, so that's now there with Pride Month flag.
What
Anyone
happened to
else
the
have
Ho
anything to add, to share?
Rick.
Rick,
What happened
did
to
you?
the Ho Chunk flag?
I think they took the pride flag down and put the.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty tattered.
Well,
Brian?
Rick, I'm not sure if you heard, the chief shared that that flag needs some, to be replaced because it's quite tethered.
Oh, no, I didn't hear that. Thank you.
I guess for DEI, I would just like to add my my appreciation to the city of Monona for recognizing Juneteenth, and I wish I could have been at the celebration today. I'm grateful for those that were able to make it. In other DEI news, I think that I'm just very proud of the council also for the passage of the short-term rental agreement, which has a lot of equity issues surrounding this practice that make it very, very difficult for people to afford housing in Monona. And I'm looking forward to turning that around. And then also with DEI, I guess I could mention that the Landmarks Commission has been having some really productive and interesting conversations about how we might start to honor more our ancestral landmarks that are part of this community. So many of the things on the landmarks, vision have to do with houses built by wealthy people and wealthy white people. And really looking forward to what opportunities we can find.
Thank you. Anyone else? Does anyone have anything to share on sustainability efforts?
I'll just say that this kind of blends into the Monona Community Media Committee, but it was decided that we would be starting a new feature of the My Monona e-newsletter, which focused on trying to share more of the really good work that the city is doing to satisfy our sustainability goals. And a communication will be going out to all departments, probably from myself, just to sort of invite everyone to share your success stories. There are so many, and we're just not telling them because I am so guilty of this myself. For example, when it comes to social media, I just want to do the work. I don't want to do the work and tell everyone that I did the work. I just don't have time for that, right? So I barely do anything on social media, which is probably not smart for someone in my position, but we do it here in the city as well. We do all this wonderful work, and then we don't take time to tell people about this wonderful work. So hopefully that section of the newsletter will provide an opportunity to shine a nice spotlight on that good work.
Thank you. Okay, I guess we'll have committee reports then. Rick, you want to start?
Sure. I think Teresa covered sustainability. I could talk a little about the Transit Commission. We had as a special guest the general manager from Madison Metro, and he was very helpful. There were some questions that had come up previously that we wrote him, and he answered. There were others that we came up at the time. I think the one major finding was that it is possible to have a two-way bus route such that you could go from A to B as quickly as you could go from B to A here in Monona. But that would involve additional cost. He was going to give us a quote on that, but roughly it was estimated at $130,000 instead of the 80 some for a one-way bus route. But that is possible if having local bus access for shopping and going to the library or government meetings is important enough to increase the cost. That would also, of course, involve having buses going by someone's house twice as often. Instead of 16 times a day, it could be 32. But we wanted to know that just to do due diligence, and we're going to try and price that up. And I think the committee is going to try to come up with a recommendation. Probably waiting for Nancy to get back. I was just sitting in for her while she's away. But it was very generous of the general manager to give us his time, and I think we had learned a lot from his being there. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you summed up what they're talking about.
And there was no library board meeting, and the next public safety meeting will be at the end of the month, I think June 28th, and I'm hoping to be back in time for that.
Okay.
That's my report.
Alder DePula.
No updates. Parks did not meet, so no updates right now.
Alder Holmquist.
Meetings upcoming, but we recently had the ZBA, and there were 2 applicants. One was approved and one was denied.
Alder Wood.
Parks Board had its annual bike tour of some of the parks 2 weeks ago. It's always fun and educational to get out and actually see stuff on the ground. San Damiano Steering Committee meets tomorrow. We already pretty much covered license review, and that's it.
Teresa.
I'll just report on one committee, something else from community media, and also related to the e-newsletter. Our readership continues to increase. Our volunteers are knocking it out of the park. We've got some great talent on the committee. We have also a wonderful problem, which is that we get submissions that are so lengthy that our volunteers have to do an awful lot of work at cutting it down and editing, and then the people who submit the article maybe get disappointed because you cut out the part that maybe you didn't want us to cut out. So it may have been mentioned in the staff meeting this morning that we'd like people to limit their submissions to no more than 200 words. And if anyone is listening and you'd like to learn more about the newsletter, go to the City of Monona website and you can sign up to receive that electronic newsletter once a month.
Is that 200 words per item?
Yeah, like per topic. Yeah, like if you're submitting 3 things and you get 200 each.
I just had, well, actually I should let the other staff here, Chief. Sorry.
He's been so quiet and patient.
There has been a time I've said nothing.
Was there?
Yeah, just the once. Well, thank you. Thank you. I have 4 things. I'm going to go through them quickly. The first is your police department, actually your night officers. I showed up during the day, but this occurred during the day. We're at the Lake Loop event, or Loop the Lake. And so that was wonderful. That was the ideal entirely of one of our night shift officers. He convinced his colleague on the night shift to join him, and they stayed up till about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But they were active, giving out watermelon, fresh watermelon that they cut up, and cold water out there, and interacting and handing out stickers. And that's the type of stuff I think you want your police department doing. And to see just as their boss, to see them, number 1, come up with the concept, reach out to Clean Lakes and coordinate that. And number 2, to see them have so much fun. We see a lot of horrific stuff in our job and often encounter people at their lowest and at the most challenging parts in their life. But to see the smiles and how they interact with folks, and for them to hear the appreciation too, is like a shot in the arm. So thank you for those who stopped out and took pictures with us with our cowboy hats, and Andrew made fun of them. So we will take it all. 2, just because it was brought up today at council, I'll just reinforce we are a pro-arrest agency when it comes to OWI enforcement, pro-arrest agency and citation agency when it comes to non-compliance for licensed establishments. So you'll continue to see that. That's my marching orders to My representative to the LRC, which is Officer Flora, who I've assigned, he's very proactive in that regard, but not only him, because he works days, our night shift officers do a lot of bar checks, and a lot of compliance checks to our cabins, and so much so that they've established, like, they're on first name basis, not as friends, but because they know these folks so much. So just know that from our end. Whenever LRC or this body or the mayor or staff need something from us, it's treated as a priority as it relates to the licensed establishment. So we treat everyone equally under the same level of scrutiny.
Chief?
Yes.
Is there such thing as a agency that's not pro-OWI arrest?
Yes.
Really?
I will not name those if you allow me not to name those. But
No, that's
yes.
fine. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so by a pro-OWI arrest, it's actually, I made sure it was written in our policy.
Okay.
You shall. And it eliminates the discretion that officers have in, say, for example, giving somebody a ride home.
That still happens?
Yeah. There's no law saying that we're compelled to physically arrest somebody for an OWI. Yeah. So it's our policy, so they shall. Good question. Thanks for asking that. I wasn't aware that people didn't know that, so thanks.
Yeah.
So a couple more things. We're hiring. Will Nimmo and Community Media did a wonderful, wonderful job of helping us create our first ever recruitment video. I'd encourage all of you, if you haven't looked at it and you're comfortable doing so, look at it and share it, please, on your social media pages.
Is it on Monona Go?
It's on it should be on Monona Go. It's on the YouTube site, so it should be on Monona Go. I haven't checked that lately. It's definitely on our social media page. Both of them are Instagram. Did you know we had an Instagram? Our Instagram and our Facebook page. And we're trying to get it on the website too. That process has been open for about 15 days now. We'd love to have more than 8 applicants. That's where we're at so far.
Well, Brian and I applied today.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're at.
Yes. We knock on neighbors' doors and get a hold of your teacher.
You might still be at 8.
Yeah. So please spread the word. That's your future police officer. Just keep that in mind. And as I was there for Loop the Lake, or the Lake Loop event, I made sure to advertise it as well. So please spread the message, and I will talk to anyone who has a question about it. I think you all know me by now. I like to talk. So I just want to mention that we are one of 98 law enforcement agencies currently hiring, and one of about 8 agencies in Dane County that's currently hiring. So we're up against a lot, but we have a great brand here. We like to have fun, and we do our jobs, and you all allow us to do our jobs. We do it so smartly, and we do it so safely, and we do fun things too, like what I just described earlier. So.
And you have those great hats.
And we have the great hats. That's mentioned in our promo video. So.
I thought they were scary. I can't remember.
And then lastly, all of you know this, if you checked your email, I sent you an email on this, but I'm bringing this up. Number one, the mayor and I have talked about some of the concerns and ongoing growing issues with concerns of safety of individuals and or children who are with adults that are occupying medians and panhandling. I don't know if you all have seen the increase. Certainly we have. The calls have gone through the roof in the past 2 to 3 weeks. Obviously that's probably due to the warm weather, but as Madison Police starts beefing up their enforcement, and I've talked to both East District and the South District in regards to their ordinance, we are starting to see some of the influx of folks that are coming our way. So my officers raised this as a concern. I think last year when I introduced, was it earlier this year or last year when I introduced that? Not too long ago, they said, "Hey, Chief, you want to check this out?" So this Saturday, after I did a meet and greet with the Lake Loop folks, I also rode with patrol and responded to 2 disturbance calls related to persons who were occupying the medians and getting into arguments and fights and disturbances. The problem with that is that we weren't able to address the behavior because the complainants were anonymous. So we didn't have somebody who was willing to say that they saw this, were disturbed. It rose to the threshold of a citation or enforcement action. So we simply have to say, if you're doing this, please knock it off. I'll say outside of the behavior aspect, which is obviously a concern, I am concerned with folks using that opportunity to potentially defraud our residents. And what I mean by that is that I have a story for you. There is a constituent of yours who, for all the right reasons, felt as if he needed to give, or he wanted to give to a group of individuals that were requesting money at an intersection. This gentleman gave $1,200 to this individual, and they were with young children. I can tell you that it's not a case that I can prove is a crime, being theft by fraud, in which you're fraudulently using ways to take money or to convince folks to give you money for fraudulent means, saying, for example, I'm a veteran and I'm injured, and you're not a veteran and you're not injured, that sort of thing. All of our officers, for the most part, are very familiar with the folks who are out there. There are some new folks who come. The reason they're familiar is not because of necessarily we're trying to shoo folks out of the city. Is we want to make sure folks are aware of the resources and they know to call for help if they need. But oftentimes we get called for check welfare of children or persons who appear to be stumbling, who may or may not be putting on an act, by the way, and maybe in need of help. So the officers are going out there to check welfare, either on their own proactively or in response to calls. Every time they do that, there's a conversation about the resources that are available. And so my message here today is really about please give consideration, and I'm very close to determining if I'm going to do a public safety address on this point, about giving to reputable organizations who are well established, have sound reputations, that do outreach and help folks in need. That some of your taxpayer dollars go and supports anyway, but that they're out there, and there's a whole list of them that are out there. I'm not saying that it's you all. This community is really good, and you care about people, and that's why I love working here. I just want to make sure that you trust some of your staff when we tell you that some of these individuals, not all, of course, are taking advantage of folks out here. And I don't want people to come to us again and say they've lost $1,200 because they thought it was going to something that it really wasn't. And in the case I'm giving you an example of, we unfortunately had to give our opinion. We couldn't elaborate more, but to that individual that we know the circumstances of that particular individual they gave money to, and we don't think that they're necessarily in that financial distress as what they portrayed to that person who gave that money. So, and then I'll say that I know it is easy to call on us. We are the 24-hour service provider out here, and I get that. Our hands are tied, and we have limited tools on our belt. And so when it comes to enforcement of safety on medians, the previous body has made that determination, and I wholeheartedly respect that. I will tell you that there are certain members that sit on committees such as public safety, and Alder Holm was, forgive me or hit me later, I forgot to tell you this, but we do have committee members that want to revisit that based on what they're seeing and hearing from their neighbors as well. And so that's probably, and you, Alder Bernstein, if you're there, that's coming to a future public safety committee with your permission, Alder. So the moral of the story is that I love how we're all very wonderful, caring, giving people. I just need us to be a little bit more, just think it through before we reach out and give significant amounts of money to individuals. And my suggestion is consider providing money to reputable organizations who might already have that network of being able to provide help for people in need. But I'm also concerned, again, as I stated earlier, for safety. That was no gimmick, no ploy to get any ordinance passed around here. I respect this body, of course. But we have young kids who are lawfully present in the company of their parent or guardian, who are not neglected. They're not put in harm's way under the law. And so they're occupying spaces that yourselves with your kids probably wouldn't do. I don't have kids, but I probably wouldn't do. But there's nothing on my tool belt that I can prevent them from doing that. So, and then I'm here for questions, because there might be some.
And one tool would be a different ordinance, is what I'm hearing.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
And one of the tools would be a change in ordinance. Yes.
And Madison is enforcing their ordinance, and
right.
Yes, it's coming our way.
You also have concerns, though, other than medians, right? I mean,
yes.
And I don't know if you want to go into that tonight, but certainly sometime in the future, that we don't have other issues, that we don't have ordinances to
Right,
deal with.
and there might be, we might have to, yeah. So as, remember Alder Rademacher, you asked some really good questions about what is this public right of way and what's the space, what's the distance, and I believe it was you, Alder Holmquist, that said, why this street, why not that street, why is it end here or there? You have to leave some latitude in that regard. The law's got to be clear, obviously, for you to enforce, but there has to be some latitude in regards to, unless you want to name every square inch of every section of the street, of the city that you want to restrict certain behavior, and you kind of have to generalize it within the thoroughfare or within, these select streets, because what we're seeing is, folks are getting awfully close to curbs, and it's not qualifying for the violation of state law that's called sudden pedestrian movement, where I, do a jerking action or I jump out in the street, which causes a safety issue for traffic, et cetera. It's just simply standing, not on the street, but on the curb, and holding a sign that might be blocking people's view, or setting up a lawn chair with an umbrella. Not sure if you've seen that one lately. That might be prohibiting or inhibiting view. We need more tools on our belt if you'd like us to start regulating some of this behavior. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief,
I have one question for the chief.
Okay. Rick?
Yeah, I've been looking at your reports, and I'm seeing about 4 OWIs a month or so. And you and I traded emails about tracking the place of the last drink, but you had other ideas about how to maybe go upstream from the OWI and maybe look at causes or contributors. Is that something we can talk about at the public safety meeting?
I think it's appropriate. I think I've got a lot of ideas, not a lot of resources, but I'm happy to talk about that. And I don't mean to kid, Alder. I think it's a very, very valid inquiry and worthy of explanation. There's several models that have been proven to work with regards to the enforcement aspect as far as how to deter that behavior. That is something that I think that law enforcement and the Tavern League have been working on for years to try to address. And we are on obviously the education side, which will play a role in too, but mainly on the enforcement side to make sure lives aren't lost. And so when we do these things such as compliance checks, it's not just the officer walking in the bar to see if a license is hanging on the wall or if there are licensed bartenders. They're also looking for over-serving and seeing if there's any patterns or issues of behavior when it comes to that. And this city has, my understanding, has had to address some of those issues before. So that's not something new. And it's something that, with, for example, a traffic officer that I've talked to the mayor and I've talked to some of you about, that would be on their to-do list too, as to help come up with programs, solutions, initiatives in which they can be the lead on and they can be the specialists on. A lot of communities have specialists that address traffic behaviors as well as OWI level enforcement.
Okay.
So I'll leave that up to you
I'm
and
sure
Alder
there's-
Holmquist in determining if that's on a
Yeah.
future public safety committee meeting or not.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot more to this than I can begin to imagine, but maybe just something for educational purposes, just bring it to the safety meeting. And
absolutely, and on that point, I said I was going to be quick, and never does happen that way. Alderwood, I'm sure, is aware that a place of last drink is collected, and if requested with advance notice, The LRC would have that information. Of course, you all as the governing body here would have that as well. Just give us, it's not something that I can make a quick keystroke on, so we'd need some time to do that research. But it's also, as I mentioned to you in my email, you rely on the intoxicated person giving you factual information about where they consumed their last drink.
And of course, a lot of it could be in somebody's house or something too,
Right.
right?
So, Chief, that's a standard question that that the drivers asked when you pull them over?
It is on the state form.
Okay.
It is not a mandatory question on
Okay.
the state form. We ask that question, but we're a small community with only so many licensed establishments. There is an initiative and a grant actually funded to look at this more on a countywide level and a regional level, because it'd be great that if all of us share that collected data somewhere. It is a challenge to collect that data. It's handwritten in, and the naming of one tavern that you know of might be different than what I call the same tavern.
Right.
And it takes a lot of human hours to actually put that all together in a format that can be utilized. And so there was an attempt, I think you might have been part of that with Traffic Safety Committee, but there was an attempt several years ago to look into that. And it's a proven model to have worked into looking at problem areas, problem taverns in the region. I know our taverns really well.
Yeah.
We only have so many of them. Our officers are going to be able to identify which ones are potentially the over-serving or the allowing somebody to potentially leave in that state, and which ones are doing a wonderful job. I no longer know Madison's issues and their tavern problems, and I don't attend their LRC meetings, for example. And when we identify, say for example, we've had 2 OWIs, and they both identified a tavern downtown Madison as their place of last drink. And we become concerned that this one tavern is over-serving in Madison. We will reach out to Madison as a courtesy. Not only as a courtesy, we want to save lives up here, and let them know about that. And they'll do the same with us. But that is not sort of something that's automatic. It's got to be something that stands out. And I'm sure you all as council members have colleagues that you might communicate. I'm sure the LRCs might have staff that communicate between each other as well.
Okay, thank you.
Did I mess anything up, Attorney Cole?
No, it's a great discussion. The only thing I would add, and not to prolong this, but keep in mind, the standard for driving is generally 0.08. It can go as low as 0.05. The standard for over-service is an entirely different standard. So if they serve somebody, he drives away and gets an OWI, they may not have overserved the customer at all. So just because their customer got an OWI may not be any reflection on the service from the establishment.
Yeah, it's called a bell curve.
Okay.
It's a physiological response to your body after it consumes alcohol and what happens. Show up to a few. Alder, you mentioned you showed up to an OWI hearing maybe. I would encourage any of you to maybe sit in on a couple if you're really curious, or maybe YouTube or watch some.
Yeah.
Because it is, I've literally sat on the stand for 8 hours testifying in an OWI arrest before. It is, and I've handled homicides, and I've not been on the stand for that long. So it's such an elaborate process. There's so many pieces that go into that, and so that's just one of those things. Thanks for highlighting that, Attorney Cole. That is why we can't necessarily always rely on that data, Alder Bernstein, as I explained to you in that email.
Thank you. I think it's a good discussion to have. Thank you.
Attorney Cole, do you have any news for us?
I do have 2 sort of feel-good things Monona should be proud of. Well, one, the chief mentioned the sort of outreach that the officers do with the liquor establishments. And you all should know that's a fine line they have to walk. I mean, they're both the enforcer, the heavy, but they're also sort of, hey, if you have problems that are not wrongdoing on your part, customers that get in fights and stuff, they want to encourage them to call the police. It's a fine line, and the Monona Police Department and frankly, your city clerk too, do a fine job of walking that fine line of encouraging working with the establishment, but then also when they go wrong, being the enforcer, and that's difficult. I think Benona should be proud of how we handle that here. The other thing, and I'm hoping I'm not stealing anybody's thunder, but we learned at the staff meeting today that VMO is now getting the award for Station of the Year again, which again is,
Fantastic.
quaint little Monona radio station, but it's like dominating the awards. So 2 things that I think our residents should be very proud of. Thank you.
Aline, do you have anything?
No.
Mark?
Just so, no, we're planning on canceling the next meeting July 3rd, but Doug Plowman might need something for his work on North Point, which is down by Broadway, and we might need to get an agreement signed, so he might need maybe some timing issues, so I might send an email out if it's needed to maybe have a special meeting on a different day other than that. So just be aware of that. It's related to a developer's agreement for North Park, so they can start doing their construction here.
Yeah, because they've got a real time element with the tax credits that they got and everything, so. Well, and you stole my big announcement, reminding people we aren't meeting next time.
Right.
And so this may be Mark's last
That's the
meeting, or
last
if we have the special meeting, he'll be there, but last meeting as the interim administrator, I'm sure he'll be happy to have his Monday evenings back.
So now Mark's going to hang out on his patio drinking pina coladas on Monday nights?
Right.
Zooming our meetings.
Is there anything to be said about the community festival that we're gonna?
It's the 2nd through the 4th.
Yeah, I mean, is there something we should? No.
Come to the community festival.
Yes, second, third, and fourth.
It's fun.
There is a hard stop for the carnival. Will be 9 o'clock.
Okay.
All 3 nights. They could be there a day early for the
Saturday.
carnival. It would be from 12 to 5. Or
Okay.
12 to 5. But otherwise, look on their website for their information.
Sure. Yep.
What's the hard stop at 9 o'clock?
For the carnival, there was
the
issues last year with the rides, and we just made sure that we had that because it was just play by ear. Now we just
Oh, I see.
And we are going to be working on a written agreement with the festival committee, which is something I've thought for a long time we ought to have, and hopefully we'll have that in place for next year, so. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, is there?
Motion to adjourn?
I was going to say, we don't have any appointments right now. Okay, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned, thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.